The sun was too bright for grief. It fell across the marble steps of the chapel like it hadn't read the room, lighting every face that wanted to hide. Black clothes gleamed instead of absorbing sorrow. Sunglasses reflected instead of protecting. I stood at the top step, my hand on the railing, pretending not to notice how many people still looked at me when they thought they shouldn't. I was the ex-wife. The mistake. The ghost that didn't belong at the funeral. But I came anyway. He'd been my husband once. My mistake, my lesson, my history. We hadn't spoken in years, but grief isn't rational. It's muscle memory. My body brought me here before my mind could argue. The service ended before I realized how long I'd been holding my breath. When I turned to leave, that's when I saw him. Standing near the sunlight pouring through the doorway. Tall black shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his forearms. His hair caught the light, golden at the edges, eyes too direct for someone so young. He looked at me like he knew exactly who I was. I told myself not to stare. I'd met him years ago, briefly, at some family dinner when he was still in college. Awkward and polite, but the man standing before me wasn't that boy. He had the posture of someone who'd learned his own name, who'd stopped asking for permission. Mrs. Vale, he said softly, his voice low and rough at the edges. I didn't think you'd come. It's just Ava now, I said, keeping my tone even. And I had to. Whatever he was, he mattered once. He nodded, his gaze lingering a second too long. You look different, I smiled faintly. Time does that. He hesitated, hands in his pockets. Still, he said, you make everyone else fade a little. There it was, the kind of line that should have sounded rehearsed, but didn't. It came out like a confession he hadn't meant to say aloud. The silence that followed was soft and electric. Outside, the city was alive, car doors, voices, the hum of life continuing as if no one had died. Sunlight reflected off the glass buildings beyond the cemetery gates. I needed air, motion, distance, but he walked beside me as if it was decided. We stopped near a row of parked cars, the wind teasing the hem of my dress. Are you heading somewhere? He asked. Home, I said. Eventually. He tilted his head, studying me. You look like someone who doesn't go home right away. Someone who takes the long way just to think. The observation was too sharp, too intimate. Do you always analyze people you barely know? He smiled. Only the ones I've been curious about for a long time. I should have laughed. I didn't. His honesty disarmed me. I could feel the distance between us. A few feet of sunlight and air. But it might as well have been the space between restraint and ruin. He was standing close enough that I caught the faint scent of his cologne, the warmth of his skin. I'm sorry about your uncle, I said finally, needing to say something neutral. He nodded. Thank you. He used to talk about you, you know. I turned toward him. Oh, not much, he said. Just that you were the only one who ever really challenged him. That's one way to put it, I said, glancing down. We were good at fighting, not so good at stopping. He laughed quietly. The sound was too young, too alive for the setting. He said you were the only person who didn't let him win. I liked that. His words shouldn't have mattered, but they did. The air felt heavier, not with grief, but with something else. Awareness. I saw it in his posture, in the way his hand brushed his shirt cuff, in the way his eyes didn't move away when they should have. I should go, I said. Thank you for saying that. Of course, he said, but he didn't step back. He stayed right there, sunlight cutting across his jaw, eyes unreadable. You were different then, he said. At that dinner, you looked untouchable, and now, he hesitated. Now you look real. The words sank under my skin like warmth after cold. I wasn't sure what scared me more, that he meant it, or that I liked hearing it. I turned, taking a step away. Goodbye, Ethan. He didn't move. You remembered my name. Of course I had. I didn't look back as I walked toward my car, but I could feel his eyes on me, like sunlight that refused to dim. Every step felt deliberate, measured. The click of my heels against the pavement became the only sound I trusted. I sat in the driver's seat, exhaled, and stared ahead for a long moment. The reflection in the rearview mirror showed a woman I didn't entirely recognize. Calm, composed, but shaken beneath it all. And then, a soft knock on my window. He stood there again. "Sorry," he said when I lowered the glass. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine," I lied. He leaned down, his face level with mine, eyes steady. "You don't look fine." There was something in the way he said it. Not pity, not curiosity, but certainty. As if he saw the truth through the mask I'd spent years perfecting. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. He glanced at the passenger seat. "Can I walk you to your car next time instead?" "Next time?" He smiled just barely. "If you ever feel like talking, or not talking, I'd like to see you again." The way he said it, not as a request, but a quiet statement, unsettled me more than it should have. "Ethan," I started. He stepped back, hands in his pockets again. "Think about it," he said. "You know where to find me." Then he turned and walked away, the sunlight following him across the pavement. I sat there long after he'd gone, fingers tightening around the steering wheel. My heart was steady, but my breath wasn't. Some part of me wanted to dismiss it. The moment, the spark, the foolishness of it all. But as I drove away, his words replayed themselves like an echo I couldn't silence. "You make everyone else fade a little." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost. It had been a week. A week of pretending that sunlight didn't remind me of his voice, or that the quiet didn't sound like the space between our sentences. I told myself that what happened outside the chapel was just a byproduct of grief, proximity and emotion blurring lines. I'd forgotten how to feel, that was all. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying. He texted once. A simple, "You left your scarf in the car park. Want me to drop it off?" I hadn't left anything behind. I knew that immediately. It was an excuse, one I could have ignored. But I didn't. I replied, "I'll come get it." We met in the afternoon, at a quiet cafe tucked between glass buildings and trees that filtered sunlight onto the pavement. I wore white, not black. And for the first time in years, I noticed how the color made me feel alive. He was already there, sitting at an outdoor table, sleeves rolled up, black shirt open at the throat. The sunlight caught in his hair, turned his skin golden. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled. Not politely, not cautiously, just like he'd been waiting. "You found it," I said, sliding into the chair opposite him. He placed the scarf on the table. My scarf, somehow real, though I didn't remember leaving it. "I told you I did." "You also told me I looked fine when I didn't," I said. He grinned. "I'm a good liar when I care about someone's peace." That word, care, made me still. I picked up the cup the waiter brought me, just to have something to hold. The cafe was alive with quiet city noise, laughter, clinking cups, the hum of midday traffic. Everything felt too vivid. I could smell the coffee, the faint citrus of his cologne, the sunlight on concrete. "How are you?" he asked. "I've been better," I said, "and worse." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You always talk like that?" "Like what?" "Like every answer is a riddle you dare people to solve." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I just don't owe anyone simple answers anymore." He nodded, slow. "Maybe that's what I like about you." The space between us hummed again. Every movement felt significant. The way his fingers tapped against the table, the way my wrist brushed his as I reached for my cup. The sunlight turned the moment into something almost cinematic, too beautiful to belong to reality. "I thought about you," he said quietly. I froze, the words unexpected. "At the funeral?" I asked. He shook his head. "After. I kept wondering what it would take for you to stop pretending you're untouchable." My throat tightened. "You're assuming I am." He met my gaze unflinching. "You hold yourself like someone who's been disappointed too many times and refuses to show it again." I looked away. "That's very poetic for someone your age." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You say that like it's supposed to mean something." "Age." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The conversation dissolved into silence, the kind that was too alive to be comfortable. I felt his eyes on me, patient and knowing, as if he could wait forever for the truth I wouldn't give. When we finally stood to leave, he walked beside me down the sunlit street. The city glimmered around us, storefronts reflecting gold, the faint scent of jasmine from a passing breeze. "Do you always take everything so seriously?" he asked. "Do you always take nothing seriously enough?" He laughed under his breath. "Touché." We reached the corner, and I should have said goodbye. Instead, I hesitated. The moment stretched, sunlight catching the side of his face, the edge of his shirt fluttering in the breeze. He stepped closer. "You don't have to keep pretending you don't feel this," he said quietly. "This? This pull. The one you keep trying to rationalize." I met his gaze, steady now. "It's not rational. That's the problem." He took another step closer, his voice low. "Then maybe stop thinking for a minute." The world around us blurred. Sound, motion, everything. Until it was just him. Sunlight. Breath. His hand brushed mine. Light, accidental, intentional all at once. Every nerve in my body felt like it remembered something it shouldn't. "I should go," I whispered. "I know," he said. But he didn't move. Neither did I. When I finally stepped back, it felt like pulling free from gravity. I walked away without looking over my shoulder, but I knew, absolutely knew, he was still standing there, watching me leave. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every thought circled back to the way he'd looked at me, not with hunger, but with understanding. That was what unnerved me most. It wasn't about attraction. It was recognition. A few days later, he texted again. "I'm at the gallery, the one you used to curate. Thought you might want to see what they've done with it. I shouldn't have gone. I told myself I wouldn't. And yet, by late afternoon, I was there. The sunlight through the tall windows flooded everything with gold. The paintings glowed. The marble floors mirrored every step. He stood in the center of the main hall, hands in his pockets. That same black shirt catching the light. "You came," he said. "I shouldn't have. But you did." Something in his voice. Quiet pride, quiet relief, made me want to smile and scream at once. We walked through the gallery in silence. Every sound echoed, the click of my heels, the soft hum of the air conditioner, the faint rhythm of his steps behind me. When I stopped in front of a painting, abstract swirls of color, light and shadow, he stopped beside me. "What do you see?" he asked. "Chaos," I said, "but beautiful chaos." He studied me instead of the painting. "That sounds like you." I turned toward him, ready to deflect, but the words died in my throat. He was standing close, too close, and there was nothing casual about it. His breath brushed my cheek when he spoke. "I don't think I ever stopped being curious about you. My heart beat once hard." "You barely knew me," he smiled faintly. "Sometimes you only need a moment to know you'll remember someone." It was ridiculous. It was dangerous. It was real. I should have stepped back. I didn't. The air between us changed, heavier, slower. He didn't touch me, not really, but the nearness felt like contact. His voice dropped, softer now. "You can tell me to stop." "I don't think you're doing anything," I whispered. He smiled, his eyes searching mine. "Not yet." And then, mercifully, he did nothing. He didn't reach for me. He didn't close the distance. He just stood there, letting the tension breathe, letting me feel everything I'd tried not to. After a long silence, I exhaled. "You're too young to understand what this is." He looked at me like he was memorizing the shape of the words. Maybe I'm too young to be afraid of it. The honesty broke something in me. For a long time, I'd been the one in control. In boardrooms, relationships, everything. But in that gallery, under the golden afternoon light, I realized control had never been strength. It was armor, and for the first time, I didn't want to wear it. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely above a breath. "Ethan, you should go." He nodded, eyes soft, unreadable. if that's what you really want. It wasn't, but I let him believe it. When he left, the gallery felt too large, too quiet. The sunlight on the marble shimmered, and for a moment, I stood there, alone, but trembling with the awareness that something inside me had already shifted. It wasn't surrender. Not yet, but it was the beginning of it. The days that followed felt quieter, but not peaceful. Silence had texture now. It reminded me of sunlight pressing through blinds, of messages left unsent, of words I'd swallowed before they reached the air. I told myself distance was strength, that I'd done the right thing by letting him go before anything truly began. But strength doesn't ache like this. A week passed, then another. Everywhere I went, something pulled me back to that gallery, to him, to the way the sunlight touched his face when he said, "Maybe I'm too young to be afraid of it." I hadn't realized how much of my life had been about fear. Fear of repeating mistakes, fear of being seen too closely, fear of wanting something that might not last. But he'd looked at me like I wasn't a mistake, like I was alive. It was Saturday afternoon when I saw him again. I was standing at a bookstall on a sunlit boulevard, flipping through an old photography collection. I felt it before I saw it, that quiet awareness, like gravity shifting. "Still avoiding me?" he said, voice low, amused. I turned, and there he was. Black shirt again, sleeves casually rolled, the top button open. The sunlight caught in his hair and reflected off his sunglasses. He looked impossibly self-assured, but there was warmth in his expression. "I wasn't avoiding you," I said, "just making sure the world didn't stop turning." Did it? Maybe a little. He smiled, the kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness, only understanding. "Then let's fix that." Before I could respond, he took the book from my hand and glanced at it. "You always read things that hurt." "It's called taste," I said. "It's called punishment." The quiet between us deepened. Not uncomfortable, just full. We walked together down the boulevard, sunlight spilling between the buildings, the world golden and wide around us. He talked about ordinary things, his work, the city, the places he wanted to see. I listened, half aware of the way his hand brushed mine every so often, as if by accident. When we reached the edge of a small park, he stopped. "Can we sit for a minute?" We found a bench under the trees. The leaves filtered the light into gold and green, and for a moment it felt like time had softened. He leaned back, watching me. "You still look like you're waiting for someone to give you permission to breathe." "I'm breathing just fine." He tilted his head. "You're surviving. That's not the same thing." I turned toward him, quiet. "You talk like you've lived more than 23 years. Maybe I've just paid attention." His gaze held mine, steady, unguarded. "You scare me sometimes," I said before I could stop myself. "Why?" "Because you see too much." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the point." The silence stretched again, but this time, it wasn't distance. It was recognition. I could feel everything. The sunlight on my skin, the pulse in my wrist, the air between us that felt too charged to be innocent. I didn't know if it was love or something close enough to hurt the same way. But it was real. "Ethan," I said finally, "you should be out there, finding people your own age, people who don't come with history." He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You think I want simple?" "I think you deserve it." He shook his head slowly. "No, I want truth, whatever shape it comes in." I looked away, eyes on the sunlight dancing across the grass. "Truth is messy." "Then let's make a mess," he said softly. I laughed, an unsteady sound that felt like something breaking open inside me. He reached out then, not in urgency, but in certainty. His hand covered mine, warm, steady, real. "I'm not asking for a promise," he said. "I just want a chance to see where this could go. To see you, something in me gave way, not with drama or thunder, but with quiet surrender, like a door I hadn't realized was locked finally opening." I looked at him for a long time. His face was sunlit, his expression open, unafraid. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" "Yes." The word felt foreign and right all at once. He smiled, that slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Then let's start there. We didn't rush it. That was the beauty of it." Days turned into small rituals, morning coffee at the same corner cafe, walks through the city that stretched longer each time, conversations that started with jokes and ended in confessions. He told me about his childhood, his ambitions, the way his uncle used to talk about failure as if it were a friend you had to learn to live with. I told him about the years I'd spent rebuilding myself, how it looked strong from the outside but felt lonely underneath. He listened like every word mattered. Sometimes he'd reach across the table, fingers brushing mine. Not to claim, just to remind me he was there. Once I asked, "Aren't you afraid of what people would say?" He shrugged. "They'll say what they want, but they don't get to live this." The simplicity of it broke me a little. It wasn't the grand declarations I'd once thought love required. It was this: sunlight on his face, laughter between sentences, the quiet certainty that I didn't have to be anyone else. Weeks later, we stood on a rooftop terrace at sunset. The city below shimmered, glass towers catching the last gold of the day. He leaned on the railing beside me. "Do you ever think about him? Your ex?" "Sometimes," I said. "But it's like remembering a movie I used to know by heart and don't need to watch again." He nodded. "I get that." I turned toward him. "He'd hate this, you know, you and me." "Then maybe that's how I know it's right." The honesty in his voice made me laugh, quiet, unguarded. The wind moved through my hair. I felt weightless, grounded, alive. When I looked at him, really looked, it wasn't the age difference or the history that defined what we were. It was the simple truth that I felt seen. "I don't know where this goes," I said. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I know where I want to start." He reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. His touch was light, reverent. The world seemed to pause around us. Sunlight hit the horizon, turning everything gold. The city glowed. I smiled, a real smile this time. "You're persistent, aren't you? I just don't like leaving things unfinished." "Then don't." He stepped closer, his voice a whisper that felt like a promise. "I won't." We stood there, two people who shouldn't have found each other, bathed in the same golden light, breathing the same air. The past no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a path that had somehow led me exactly here. Later, as we walked back through the city streets, his hand slipped into mine. No one looked twice. No one cared. The world went on, bright and loud, as if love were the most ordinary thing in it. And maybe that was the miracle. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I was living. And when he turned to me at the crosswalk, sunlight gleaming in his eyes, and said, "Can I see you again tomorrow?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "You can." He smiled, that same quiet certainty in his expression, and the light turned green. If you felt that pull, that slow, quiet kind of love that finds you when you've stopped looking, leave A in the comments. Tell me if you believed in Ava and Ethan's connection. If you've ever met someone who made the world look different in daylight. Follow, share, and subscribe for more stories that linger. Love that feels real, raw, and impossible to forget.